Welcome to Coffee with Bible and Pop Culture. There is a space for everyone at this table. We are here to ask hard questions, to have honest conversations, and to journey together. We're here to talk about the things that matter most to us and to remind you that you're not alone. Our heart behind this time is to ask hard questions and to really dialogue about what we're going through. Let's engage, explore, and enjoy. Hey, good morning, Bible and Pop Culture. Ohana, we have woken up this morning to hang out with you. It is 5:28 a.m. here in Hawaii. What are you drinking, Ryan?
You know, I had water, but seeing you drink coffee makes me want coffee now.
Thank you for joining us. Bible and Pop Culture is a online magazine and nonprofit, and our goal here is to provide a community of authentic Christianity so we can ask hard questions and we can gain understanding and we can connect ourselves to the Lord as we journey together. So we're so thankful to have guest Ryan Jacobs with us today. He wrote an article for our March issue called Depression, NF, and the Christian Life. And Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself this morning?
Sure. My name is Ryan Jacobs. I'm a graduate of New Hope Christian College in 2015, and I've been serving and been served at Island Grace Church in Mililani, Hawaii for the past 9 years.
Yeah. My husband and I graduated from Pacific Rim Bible College back in the day before they changed their name in 2010.
That's not that long ago.
Yeah. Well, your article talked about depression in the church, and this is an issue that we wanted to tackle together because it's not talked about a lot, but it's something that we have seen, experienced, and impact our communities in really real ways. And so thank you for your courage to write this article. Thank you for taking time to talk with us today. In your article, you wrote that depression is not so much the presence of sadness as much as the absence of feeling. And you referenced NF. For those of you guys who are going to read the article after this, go read it if you haven't yet, is a rapper. And you talked about how his words are so relatable. And that's why he kind of rose to popularity very quickly. And in the chorus of his song, Paralyzed, he writes, "I'm paralyzed. Where are my feelings? I no longer feel things. I know I should. I'm paralyzed. Where is the real me? I'm lost and it kills me inside. I'm paralyzed." So can you describe for us what someone who is dealing with depression is feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we can dive into that too, we need to define our terms. I think depression is often used synonymously with sadness, and they're not the same thing. Like we say in the article, depression can be accompanied with sadness, but it's not necessarily the same thing. Depression is, like you said, the absence of feeling anything at all. It is um, everyone will experience sadness, but not everyone will feel depression, and it's quite intense. For those who've experienced it before, it's unmistakable. The things that you love to do and the things that you can't wait to do and the people you enjoy, all of those things suddenly become bland to you, and there's no explanation why. And and when that continues on for the course of weeks and months, it becomes almost unbearable for a lot. Yeah.
And what do you feel like are the biggest concerns for the people that are struggling with depression? Or before we actually, sorry, before we answer that question, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey and your experience?
Yeah. Well, it's actually as long as I can remember, I've struggled with depression.
Mm.
But it led me to the church when I was a senior in high school. It became so powerful for me that it led me to cry out for something other than what I was trying for,
Mm.
and I cried out for the Lord, and He saved me at 17 as in high school, and ever since then, I've been a Christian and I've grown, but I've still had that struggle, and it's gotten actually worse
Mm.
over the years. But I've completely changed my perspective on it, and it's I don't see it as hopeless anymore. I see it as that there's hope, that um, there's a Lord, there's a God of this universe that can help me through it. Um, but yeah, it's real. It's very real for Christians and non-Christians.
Mm. I was listening to someone speak about it this week, and she was saying that we can't just like wrangle our behavior into obedience, right?
Mm,
Like,
mm,
um, and we want to we want to invite Jesus into that equation. And I love that you were honest in saying that actually it's gotten worse, because um, just because we have this our Christian faith doesn't mean that we're not going to struggle.
mm,
Yeah,
for
and I
sure.
think that's a message that we want to address today, especially for people that are in Christian communities or maybe have felt like they can't engage in a Christian community because of their struggle with depression. And we want to encourage them today to say that, we see you, we understand that just because we are Christian doesn't mean that this stuff isn't real.
Mm.
And especially in today's culture, would you how prevalent would you say depression is in the church today?
Well, y- there's different research on it. So some researchers believe that 1 in 2 adults experience depression, and
Mm.
then there's actually a lot of research that says between 5 to 8% of adults will experience depression. I personally would lean more towards the less number, because, like I said, oftentimes depression is used synonymously with sadness, and everyone is sad, so they claim to be depressed, but
Mm.
true clinical depression, I think, would be around the 5 to 8%. But people might say, that's not a lot. That's 25 million Americans in America.
Mm.
To put that in perspective, and so that might seem like a less percentage, but really that is a huge number of people, in our country, in our churches, that are experiencing it. And one of the things that blew my mind after writing this article is so much people would reach out to me that I completely would not expect, would say, I feel the same way. And it would just blew my mind to see that people all around us that don't want to talk about it are going through it, you know?
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. And I think today too, with social media and just the culture that we're living in, there's a little bit of a dissonance, right, between what we project on social media and maybe
Yeah.
what we're really experiencing, what's really happening inside of us. So I'm glad that you're a safe space for people to say, like, hey, this is what's happening in real time for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So, getting back to your journey, what do you feel like are the biggest concerns of those who are struggling with depression?
Well, it's funny. I was just watching an article. I was watching an interview yesterday from Chester Bennington. He was the lead singer of Linkin Park,
Okay.
and he he was explaining his depression to this guy on a radio show. And as many of you know, Chester Bennington is now deceased. He committed suicide, and he was explaining his struggle in the months leading up to it. And the radio host laughed at him. He
Mm.
actually laughed, and he's like, "What are you talking about, man?" Because it was so intense. And to me, that is so sad. Um, and I think that's a big concern of people struggling, is that people are going to laugh at you. They don't understand. What do you mean you don't want to be alive anymore? What, that doesn't make any sense to me, and that's a big concern. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and more than 50% of people who commit suicide are struggling with depression. And so it's a huge concern that it's a leading cause of death, but people laugh at others who are struggling through this thing just because they can't see it. It's in their brains, you know?
Mm,
And so it's a concern that it's not like if I have a broken arm and I show you I have a broken arm, you can help me, you can physically see that, but something going on in between your ears, it's not something you can see. And
yeah.
so it's a big concern of us who struggle with depression to explain it to people and receive empathy, because
Mm,
it's something that they might have not seen before or ever felt before.
yeah. I'm glad that you brought up, um, the issue of suicide in connection to depression. I have experienced that very closely within my own church community and within my family, um, and I was listening to a podcast yesterday also, called Rhythms for Life, by Rebecca and Gabe Lyons, and they were talking about the reality of depression amongst pastors and how sometimes they feel like as soon as you talk about that you're feeling depressed, you kind of lose your credibility, like you lose your ability to lead, um, and that's just not the way it should be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that. That's actually precisely the reason why I had to step down as a youth pastor myself.
Mm,
Uh, it was so strong that, and to admit it to people, what it did feel like I'm in no place to lead these people if I myself am struggling with life myself, and
mm,
so um, I didn't understand the resources and the ways to cope with it that I do now, but at the time it was unbearable, and it was going on for months and months and months, and I finally had to call it quits. But I imagine there are many more men and women across the country that have that same experience,
yeah. Yeah. So at what point do you reach out for help?
I would say when it becomes a pattern. There might be people who experience depression in a quick episode and it's gone.
Mm,
But for people who see it as a pattern, as a way of life, and things just don't help you, it's not something you can just snap out of. You can snap out of sadness by listening to a nice song, or you can snap out of sadness, but you can't snap out of depression.
mm,
You can do whatever you want. It's ingrained. It's something that is just in you, and the Lord, I believe, is in control of that. But it's when it becomes a pattern and it becomes something you can't snap out of, and it's affecting your way of life. I definitely think it's time to reach out for help.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what do you feel like helped you? Um, what do you feel like helped you? How did you reach out for help?
Well, originally when I first started reaching out to friends, they didn't understand. It was similar to the Chester Bennington without laughing.
Mm,
Um, and so that was further discouraging me. So that led me back to the scriptures. And to be honest with you, there was nothing other than the scriptures that gave me just hope and joy and peace and comfort. Uh, it was like supernatural, you know. Um, I just staying in the scriptures and meditating on it. Um, it really helped. And I also see a psychiatrist, a secular psychiatrist, and so that I think that's another thing to say is that there's nothing inherently wrong or evil with medicine. I think
yeah.
medicine is a great thing. Antidepressants is a great thing. Um, taking while you're trusting the Lord in it, you can take antidepressants and trust in the Lord. I believe
Yes.
that.
Yes.
just like I take Tylenol when I get headaches. It's the same thing. Um, I think it's yeah, just reaching out and trusting in the Lord and being in His Scripture and talking to a psychiatrist. Those are great ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. There's a space in our journey as Christians and those who deal with um, depression or any kind of mental health issue. There's a space for um, the professionals. There's a space for the the mental health industry to partner with the
Absolutely.
Christian church to do life together and to build genuine community.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the scripture. What are a few scriptures that you just ran to and sat with?
Man, there's three actually. Number one, I love Psalm 42.
Mm.
I just love how the author begins with, "Why are you downcast, O my soul, and why are you disturbed within me?" It's just awesome because he literally doesn't understand why. Otherwise, why would he ask the question? And there's many times in our lives where depression just overtakes you, and you don't understand why. You have
Mm.
no idea why. And so I find consolation and I find empathy in reading that psalm and seeing how he just tells himself, "Hope in God, hope in God, hope in God," even though he's suffering and he doesn't understand why. So there's that. And the other two, I love going to the story of Job, specifically
Mm.
chapters 1 and 2, where Job lost everything. If there was a person who had a good reason to be depressed, it'd be Job.
Yeah.
And at the end of Job 1, he says, he tore his clothes and said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've lost everything, but I came into the world with nothing. I trust in the Lord." And just seeing someone who lost absolutely everything and trusting in God um, is just encouraging. And also the story of Joseph in the end of Genesis, where his brothers sold him into slavery and he was in jail for many years and he suffered and suffered and suffered. And at the end, when he sees his brothers again, they come to him and he says, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." And I think it's just to see how he can see God sovereignly over all of that is just beautiful. And for me, it's just encouraging. So, yeah, Psalm 42, Job, and Joseph, those always really encourage me.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing those. Uh, we have a question in the comments, and I want to jump to it while we're here, but I also wanted to add that if you have questions and you'd like us to talk about it, yes, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and then we will address them as we go or get to them at the end. So there's a question in the comments that says, Ryan, do you feel it's necessary to find out how much depression is linked to chemical imbalance?
Yes, absolutely. And there's two ways that I like to quantify depression. I don't think it's a scientific way, but it's the ways that I've quantified it over the years. There's circumstantial depression and there's circumstance-less depression. And I see that scripturally. That's the reason why I've kind of come up with those terms. Psalm 42, like I said, I believe is an example of circumstance-less depression, where he says, "Why are you downcast?" There is no circumstances or there's no causation to his depression in that particular psalm. He doesn't understand why he's depressed. Psalm 32, in contrast, is a psalm where he's saying, "My sin has caused me to have my bones break within me." So it seems
Mhm.
that his depression in that psalm is coming from his own sin and he understands it. So there's
Mm.
a causation there, there's a circumstance that's causing that. So in that sense, your chemical imbalance could be coming from Psalm 42 depression, where there's no circumstances. And so first things first, when you experience depression, I would try to seek your life, seek everything around you to see, is there sin that's causing this? Is there something I'm doing? Am I not forgiving somebody? Is there something I'm doing that's causing this? um Not, if not, then I would go to that route. As far as seeing, is there something physically wrong, is there something going on chemically within my brain that God is sovereignly over, that's causing me to have this depression, circumstanceless depression. So I would first seek to see, am I in sin? Am I following the Lord? Am I reading the scriptures? And then I would go that route. if you are doing all those things, to see if there's some sort of chemical imbalance going on there.
Mm, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, as we desire to journey in community, what are some things, some practical things that we can do to support our brothers and sisters who are struggling with depression?
Yeah. Number one, seek as best as you can to empathize. I always like this story. I have a good friend, Christian friend, who his spiritual struggle is not buying more Jordans. For me, I could wear anything from Forever 21. It doesn't matter to me what type of shoes I'm wearing. Um, but that's his real legitimate struggle. But on the flip side, he has no idea what depression is, and
Mm,
so seek to empathize. Just because you don't understand what someone is going through doesn't make it illegitimate. Don't just write them off. Seek to just tell them, hey, I'm here. I don't understand what you're going through, but I believe what you're going through is legitimate, and I'm
mm,
here for whatever you need. I think that's essential. It's just someone to hear that they're there for them, and they're not writing off their struggle and telling them to just snap out of it.
yeah.
Don't do that. Don't tell someone in depression to snap out of it. You know. Number two, I would encourage them spiritually and physically. And what I mean by that is, yes, I think a lot of us are too much on one side. You say either I'm giving you only scriptures and I'm only going to preach the gospel to you, which is great, or the other side where I'm only going to give you the physical. Go to your psychiatrist. Make sure you're working out. Make sure you're getting good sleep. You know, um, exactly. Just like Cindy said, pray more is not an empathetic answer, because some of us are too on the spiritual side where it's just pray more, just do this. But there's a physical aspect to your brain
Yes.
where you want to encourage them. Hey, maybe antidepressants are a good thing. Hey, maybe going to a psychiatrist is a good thing. Maybe you should be getting more sleep. Maybe you should be eating better. There's real legitimate physical aspects to this too. And so that's another practical way, is to make sure you're getting them spiritually and physically.
Mm,
And lastly, and I think most crucially, encourage them to be heavily involved in a local church. And I think one of the backlashes I think on my article is that it was heavy rhetoric where people thought that I was bashing the church in a sense, which is completely contrast. I would not be alive really if it wasn't for my local church, Island Grace Church, and everyone has their local church with their pastors and their elders. I think it's absolutely essential that you have a leadership that is overseeing your soul, that is praying for you,
mm.
that you're getting fellowship. That is absolutely essential. And so let's not overlook the importance of a local body and walking through all this as well.
Yeah. Kathy in the comments said it's important to hear from others when you've had that experience at some point and to know that someone is hearing you.
Hmm.
And that, yeah, that's so good. I feel like I heard also the other day that we all need a Samwise Gamgee, right? Like
Mm,
he always has, he always has, Frodo's back. And we always need somebody who is going to support us, like you said, and listen, even if they don't understand, but they're just going to be there to always have your back.
for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the things that depressed people do is try to separate, especially
Mm,
when they're not understood. They're gonna want to separate from the local church, and that's the reason why I added. And that's how I
mm,
feel every time I have an episode. I don't want to be around them, not because I don't love them. It's because I'm embarrassed. I'm
mm,
inside of myself. I know I can't relate with them, and I know that they don't understand me, and so I try to push away from them. And so that's why, as people who know someone who's struggling with it, is to reach out with them and tell them, I don't understand, but that's okay. I love you, and I'm gonna walk with you anyway. You know, and
yeah.
sometimes people trying to empathize with saying I understand often does more harm than good, because you don't understand a lot of
Mm,
times. And so yeah, that would be a good thing to do.
yeah. Um, in your article, I'm just going to read a little section that you wrote that kind of talks about what you've just said. It says, this means that by our words and our actions, we graciously keep reminding them never to lose sight of the risen, sovereign, all powerful creator of the
Mm-hmm.
universe. If
Mm-hmm.
he created the universe out of nothing, he has the power to help us stand firm in our depression. We keep pointing back to him when all hope seems lost, because hope is never lost as long as Christ is alive. And then you said, in my experience, there is something piercingly comforting about ripping my eyes off of myself and my depression and fixing them more and more on Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we can do is love them, empathize with them, and never lose sight of our Savior.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love those words.
Mm-hmm.
We're having some people in the comments just that Cindy said, yes, a holistic view, physical, mental, spiritual, and community involved.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean said that it's so important to plug into a local church family that so many people try to fight this battle alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you are watching right now and you are feeling like you don't have a community, this is part of why we're here, right? We want to say that Bible and pop culture is a community that we want to walk alongside people in this area and in whatever you're struggling with. So please, let's continue this conversation. You can reach out to us here on the Facebook page or Messenger, or connect with us through our website. And we want to continue to journey with you. So I just want to say that. Um, we have something else in the comments. I'm just going to read. It says, I've been finding that the Lord uses times when I've been depressed to help relate to, empathize with, and encourage brothers and sisters who are currently going through depression. It's incredible how the Lord
Yes.
works.
It is amazing how he uses our suffering to help others who are suffering. It's just amazing how God is providential and sovereign in that way, um, in people that otherwise could not have been helped. Without going through what you've been through, it is amazing. Thank you for that, David.
Yeah. Um, Before we kind of close out our time here, we just want to open up if there's any other questions in the comments. Um, and Ryan, is there any resources that you would recommend to us to refer to those who are struggling with depression to get help, or those of us who are struggling ourselves?
Absolutely. This right here is this book right here, The Crook in the Lot.
Mm,
It's from Thomas Boston. It's a tiny Puritan paperback, but it changed my life. It
mm,
is just amazing. This is written by a guy in the 1700s who is writing about how God is in control of the crooks in our life, and it's just understanding how God is sovereign, very similar to Joseph and Job, where He is sovereignly in control of every nook and cranny of our life. And to me, that brings so much comfort to know that. And He's my Father now. He's not a judge anymore. He's my Father. He's my shepherd now. And so, what can happen to me apart from His hand? And apart from the promise that He works all things for the good of those who love Him. It really set me straight, and it continues to encourage me today. Here's another one. Christians Get Depressed Too, from David
mm,
Murray. Just an encouraging little book on, encouraging to us as Christians that it's real for us. It's not just a
yeah.
non-Christian struggle. It's a very real thing. And he talks about real physical issues in this and how to seek help for that. And lastly, this is a classic, Spiritual Depression, from Dr. Martin Lloyd Jones. This is essentially an entire book on Psalm 42,
Mm.
on just line for line explaining more about that circumstanceless depression in Psalm 42. And that was very encouraging to go through as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Um, We'll make sure to leave links to the book resources in the comments of this afterwards, so people can go back and get connected with those.
Sure.
Yeah, so good. Well, we are going to close our time out together. Um, thank you all so much for sitting with us and engaging in this conversation. Ryan, you are such a beacon of hope and thank you for being real. Thank you for being honest about where you've come from and what you're continuing to walk through. And we are praying and hoping that anybody who is watching now or will watch this in the future uh, is encouraged by your words. Thank you so much for being here this morning, for writing this article for Bible and Pop Culture. And we want to encourage you guys to just continue this conversation in your communities. And like you said, Ryan, if it's okay that we don't know how they're feeling, we can still share a space, right? Um, we have one more question. I don't want to miss it since it's here live, so I'm just going to
Sure.
read it and then we'll close our time together. It says, how might we address those who might not have shown as much love as they ought to when dealing with someone who's going through depression?
May address those who may not have shown. Um, well, there's grace. There's
Mm-hmm.
grace. It's kind of I kind of think of Job's friends. God didn't. I mean, God, judged them, but He didn't ultimately condemn them. You're His friends, and they just needed to learn. And all of us are on a path, whether we're depressed or we're not depressed, or we're all struggling with things. We all have done things wrong.
Yes.
We've all thought wrong ways, and we're all on this path and this journey where the Lord is our shepherd, and there's grace for that. And so, just like falling into sin or whatever it might be, there's grace for you if you're a Christian. And yeah, I think just maybe seeking to learn more, to be educated more on the realities of depression would be a good thing to do, and just befriending the person and being there for them, regardless of your understanding of them or not, would be a great thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, with that, thank you guys for joining us. Let's go out in grace today and um, and embrace those people in our community. Thank you, Ryan, so much.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you guys soon.